Hi everyone, my name is Xaviera Davis and I am a nutritionist with the Nutrition, Education, and Training and Technical Assistance Division at USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on grain-based desserts in the CACFP. This webinar is part of Team Nutrition's CACFP Halftime 30 on Thursdays webinar series. These webinars are held on the third Thursday of the month in both English and Spanish. The English webinar is held from 2 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and the Spanish webinar will be held from 3 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will not host a halftime webinar in December, but on January 17th, CACFP Halftime will return, and we will continue with the topic of identifying whole grain-rich foods for the CACFP. These webinars will be recorded and made available at a later date on the Team Nutrition website. We will have time at the end of this webinar to take questions. You can use the chat box at any time during the webinar to enter your questions, and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. If you still cannot hear us through your computer speakers, you can call in by phone. Please dial 866-740-1260. When prompted, enter the access code 605-4013. This number will be shown at the bottom of each slide throughout this presentation. So if you lose audio over your computer at any point, you can call this number and you should be able to hear us using your telephone. Okay, before we get started, we want to know who you are, so please select one of the following options on the screen. Are you a child care center, family child care home, at-risk after-school care center, adult daycare center, sponsoring organization, emergency shelter, school food authority, state agency, USDA regional office, or other? Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us today. So we are also interested in learning how long you have been working with the CACFP. This includes those of you caring for infants and children during the day, those of you who may be responsible for planning menus, and those of you who are preparing meals. Please select one of the following on the slide to let us know how long you have been participating: 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 8 years, 8 to 10 years, or 10 years or more. So great. We're glad to see that we have a mix of both new providers as well as those with a little bit more experience. Now let's get started. The topic for today is grain-based desserts, and the training worksheet we will be using throughout today's webinar is grain-based desserts in the Child and Adult Care Food Program. This 2-page training worksheet is designed to help CACFP program operators do 2 things. 1, identify grain-based desserts, and 2, choose non-grain-based dessert items that can be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP. As most of you know, and as stated on the top of the first page of the worksheet, as of October 1st, 2017, grain-based desserts can no longer count toward the grain component of meals and snacks offered in the Child and Adult Care Food Program. So CACFP program operators must not serve grain-based desserts as part of a reimbursable meal or snack. This meal pattern requirement applies to all CACFP age groups and program participants. Many of you may be wondering why this change was made. The CACFP meal pattern was updated to more closely align with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. The Dietary Guidelines recommend limiting the consumption of added sugars and solid fats, which are often called saturated fats, as part of a healthy eating pattern. They also identify grain-based desserts as sources of added sugars and solid fats. Most of you are aware that grain-based desserts include foods made with grain and or flour, that are commonly served for desserts and treats like cakes, brownies, and cookies. Grain-based desserts also include other food items that you may not typically think of as desserts, like cereal bars and breakfast bars. While the top half of the first page of the training worksheet provides a review of the meal pattern requirements, the second half of the first page includes a chart that lists common grain items that are defined as grain-based desserts and cannot be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP, such as toasted pastries, gingerbread, donuts, and cookies, including vanilla wafers. If you look at the column on the right, you can view a list of food items that are not classified as grain-based desserts. These foods, which include items such as cornbread, crackers, both sweet and savory, muffins, and pancakes, can be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP. Please remember that these lists provided on the worksheet are not all-inclusive, meaning there may be other grain-based desserts that are not listed on this chart, as well as other items that could be served as part of a reimbursable meal. Now let's do a quick knowledge check. In a few moments, I will show you a poll. When you see the poll, click on the screen to enter your answer, but first let's take a look at the question together. Which of the food items listed below can be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP? Use the grain-based desserts in the CACFP training worksheet that was in your confirmation email or reminder email to help you answer the question. Please go ahead and enter your choice into the poll. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. Great job. Looks like most of you are able to identify food items that would be included in the grain-based desserts category, as well as items that could be served as part of a reimbursable meal. The correct answer is savory crackers and savory scones. If you take a look at the right column on the grain-based desserts in the CACFP training worksheet, you can see that crackers of all types and savory scones and other items such as savory biscotti and savory rice and bread puddings can also be served as part of a reimbursable meal. Using a food category or description to help you decide what is or is not a grain-based dessert means that you and other CACFP operators do not need to check the sugar, fat, or calories in a food before you serve it. For foods that are not listed in the training worksheet, think about the common perception of the food and if it is generally considered a dessert. If you are still not sure, then we encourage you to check with your state agency or sponsoring organization. Now let's take a quick look at some common scenarios that may occur at your center or home. Scenario 1. Miss June has a chocolate chip muffin on the menu for breakfast. She knows muffins can be served as part of a reimbursable meal, but she is concerned about the added sugar in the muffin. Can Miss June serve the muffin as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP? So this is a scenario that many of you will encounter or may have already experienced. The training worksheet lists muffins as a non-grain-based dessert, and as such, they can be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP. While this is true, we also know that there are a lot of muffins on the market that may seem more like a high-sugar dessert than a nutritious snack or breakfast item. In situations like this, we encourage CACFP providers to use their discretion. Although the item in this scenario would be creditable as part of a reimbursable meal or snack, we ask you to remember that this meal pattern requirement was implemented to align with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans and its goal of limiting the intake of added sugars and solid fats. We encourage CACFP providers to continually strive to serve nutritious foods that contribute to the wellness and healthy growth and development of children. For alternate options, try quick breads, traditional muffins, and baked oatmeal squares. The recipe you see on the screen are lower in added sugar and saturated fat. Each of the recipes can be found on the Food and Nutrition Service USDA standardized recipe page, and all of the recipes on the screen are available in servings of 25, 50, and 100. We will send out the web address to these recipes in the post-webinar email. We also want you to remember that quick breads are breads that are leavened with ingredients like baking powder and baking soda instead of yeast. For the purposes of meal planning, quick breads are credited similarly to muffins and continue to be part of a reimbursable meal. If you look at the training worksheet, you will see that the first item listed under non-grain-based desserts column says banana bread, zucchini bread, and other quick breads. So let's take a look at another common scenario. I like to bake. One of my favorite snack foods is a homemade brownie that includes healthier ingredients like applesauce to reduce the amount of added sugar and saturated fat. Can homemade grain-based desserts made with healthier ingredients be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP? So grain-based desserts, whether they are store-bought or homemade, cannot count toward the grain component of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP, even if some of the traditional ingredients have been replaced by healthier alternatives. Similarly, grain-based desserts that are whole grain rich also cannot count toward the grain component of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP. Try serving these recipes to add some variety to your menu. Sweet potato bread squares, granola, and fruit pizza. When serving granola cereal, remember that it must meet the sugar limit of no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. These recipes also yield 25, 50, and 100 servings, and they can be found on the USDA standardized recipe page. Now let's do another knowledge check. So in a few moments, I will show you a poll where you can click on the screen to enter your answer, but let's take a quick look at this question together. Can homemade or commercially prepared quick breads be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP? Good job, yes. Quick breads, whether homemade or commercially prepared, can be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP. If you take a look at the right column of the training worksheet, you will see that banana bread, zucchini bread, and other quick breads can be served as part of a reimbursable meal. Now let's take a look at another scenario question. Chicken pot pie is a mealtime favorite in my center. I make the crust with enriched flour. Is the crust reimbursable? So can the crust on a meat or meat alternate or savory pie credit toward the grain component of a CACFP meal? And the answer to that is yes. Crust on meat or meat alternate or savory pie, such as chicken pot pie, may credit toward the grain component when they contain at least a quarter serving of enriched or whole grain per portion. For more information on how crust on savory pies credit, please see the food buying guide. The food buying guide can be found at https://foodbuyingguide.sns.usda.gov. Some other examples of savory pies with a crust include quiche, vegetable frittata in a muffin cup, and the chicken tamale. All of these recipes can be found on the USDA standardized recipe page. And the link you see on the screen, and also it will be sent in the post-webinar email. Now let's take a look at one final scenario question. I purchased a box of cranberry oatmeal breakfast biscuits at the grocery store. The item on the box looks like a cookie, but the package says biscuit. How should the child care provider handle this scenario? So it is common to have questions when the food label or product name is misleading. Food manufacturers often label products with fancy names that can be confusing or unclear to a menu planner. Menu planners should also be aware that even if a product is not labeled as a traditional dessert item, it may contain higher levels of added sugars and saturated fats. In this situation, I would advise the child care provider to base his or her decision on the general perception of the food. The child care provider states that although the label on the box is marketing the item as a biscuit, it looks like a cookie. I would err on the side of caution and not serve this product as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP. If the child care provider needs further guidance or clarification, they can contact their sponsoring organization or state agency. As we mentioned earlier, menu planners should consider the common perception of the food item and whether it is generally considered to be a dessert or sweet item. Providers are able to serve a variety of breakfast grain items. Foods such as waffles, pancakes, biscuits, and French toast can be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP. Check out the USDA standardized recipe page to find recipes for the grain items you see on your screen. Again, these recipes are available in servings of 25, 50, and 100, and the link to the web page will be included in the post-webinar email. Now let's take a look at the second page of the worksheet where you can find some other useful tips and tools. The top half of the page highlights 2 important best practices that were highlighted throughout the webinar. Remember that even if a food is not listed as a grain-based dessert on the training worksheet, it can still be high in added sugars and saturated fat. When deciding what to serve the children and adults in your care, compare grains and choose those that are lower in sugar. The second best practice we want you to remember is that when serving grains like pancakes, waffles, or other items that are usually served with a sweet topping, try serving the food with options that may be less sweet, such as sliced fruit, fruit salsa, or yogurt. Limiting sweet toppings will help reduce children's and adults' consumption of added sugars. When sugars are added to foods and beverages to sweeten them, they add calories without contributing essential nutrients. In addition to the best practices tips, the second page of the training worksheet provides a place for you to identify grain-based desserts that may have been served in the past and 2 sections for you to write down alternatives to those grain-based desserts that can be served as part of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP. Read through steps 1 through 3 to help you complete the chart and assist with menu planning. Now let's do one final knowledge check. Once again, in a few moments, I will show you a poll. When you see the poll, please click on the screen to enter your answer. But first, let's take a look at this question together. Instead of serving donuts or cinnamon rolls, you can try pancakes or waffles topped with sliced fruit. For other choices, you can serve all of the following except. Please select one of the answers you see on your screen. Great. The correct answer is black bean brownie. Brownies are considered grain-based desserts and cannot credit toward the grain component in any meal. Recall that earlier in the webinar, we stated that grain-based desserts, whether they are store-bought or homemade, cannot count toward the grain component of a reimbursable meal in the CACFP, even if some of the traditional ingredients have been replaced by healthier alternatives. So the last piece of information we want to share with you is related to special occasions and celebrations. We know that daycare centers and family daycare homes may want to serve grain-based desserts for festivities and parties. Centers and daycare homes can serve grain-based desserts as an additional food item, but it cannot contribute to the meal pattern. Non-creditable food items are not allowable costs and must be purchased using non-program funds. So that concludes the information portion of our webinar for today. We will take questions in a few moments, so please go ahead and start typing them now into your chat box on your screen. While you guys are getting your questions entered, I will go over some post-webinar housekeeping information. Those of you attending the webinar for the entire 30 minutes today will receive a certificate via email by the end of the day on Tuesday, November 20th. Please wait until after November 20th and check your spam or junk mailboxes before inquiring about your certificate. If you are viewing the webinar with multiple people, you can print out a certificate for each person. More practice questions are available at the National CACFP Sponsors Association website at www.cacfp.org/30on-Thursdays. For those of you who want to submit or track continuing education credits with NCA, you can do that at that link as well. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Team Nutrition website. If you are watching this as a recorded webinar and want to receive a certificate, you can go to the National CACFP Sponsors Association website at www.cacfp.org/30on-Thursdays to complete the post-webinar practice questions and then receive a certificate. The certificates may be sent a few days after completing the questions. Once again, we will not be hosting a CACFP halftime webinar in December, but on January 17th, CACFP halftime will return and we will continue with the topic of identifying whole grain-rich foods for the CACFP. Now let's take a look at some of the questions we have received.
Hi, Saveira. We have two questions regarding the webinar, so I just wanted to answer those.
Okay.
One of those will be whether we will get a copy of the slides available to us, and so we are working on making them available to you, and they should be ready in the next few months. But we will start with last year's webinar slides and working towards the ones that are recent. The other one they're asking if this webinar is being recorded.
And yes, the webinars will be recorded and you will be notified when they are posted to the website.
Some of the other questions that we got, it says, can I serve homemade cupcakes made with whole wheat flour as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP for my adult participants?
Okay, great question. So cakes and cupcakes are listed as grain-based desserts in the worksheet. So this means they cannot be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP, and this applies to children as well as adult participants. Grain-based desserts that are homemade, as well as grain-based desserts that are store-bought, cannot credit toward the meal pattern. Although CACFP requirements state that at least 1 grain served per day must be whole grain-rich desserts cannot count toward that requirement.
The next question we have says, can I serve a low-fat or reduced-fat grain-based dessert to my children in my care?
Okay. No, you cannot serve a reduced-fat grain-based dessert to the children in your care. Under the CACFP meal pattern, grain-based desserts of any kind, including reduced-fat, low-calorie, reduced sugar, sugar-free, or etc., cannot be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP program.
Thank you. Next question says, this is a good one. I found a recipe for a savory bread pudding that is made with butternut squash. The recipe requires 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Can I serve this recipe?
So the answer to this question is yes. Savory bread puddings can be served as part of a reimbursable meal or snack in the CACFP. These items are not considered grain-based desserts. In the CACFP, you can also serve savory scones, such as those made with cheddar and basil, plain or savory pita chips, and any other savory foods that are listed on the worksheet.
And the next one says, can we use Exhibit A to decide what is a grain-based dessert?
Okay. The answer to that question is yes. For those of you who don't know, there is another SNS document called Exhibit A that is related to the grains requirement in the CACFP and other child nutrition programs, such as the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. When you're using the Exhibit A, foods that have a subscript 3 or subscript 4 in Exhibit A are considered grain-based desserts in the CACFP. All of the grain-based desserts listed in Exhibit A are also listed in the training worksheet we talked about today. So you can use the training worksheet we talked about today, or you can use Exhibit A to help you decide what items can and cannot be served.
Xavier, the next question that I am going to ask, we got a lot about this one. Is there a sugar limit for grain-based dessert in the CACFP?
The answer to that question is no. Grain-based desserts do not have a sugar limit or other nutrient limits associated with them. Instead, we want you to use the training worksheet or Exhibit A, as we just mentioned, to help you identify grain-based desserts. And also, if you need additional assistance, we encourage you to work with your sponsoring organization or state agency.
And the next question is also a popular one, I guess because this item is very popular with the young ones. It says, what about graham crackers and animal crackers? Are they grain-based desserts?
So both savory crackers like a Triscuit or saltines and sweet crackers like animal crackers and graham crackers are not considered grain-based desserts.
And the next one says, if we use a pie crust for something savory or salty, like a chicken pot pie, can that count towards a reimbursable meal?
The answer to that question is yes. Pie crust of savory pies, like a chicken pot pie or a quiche, can count toward the grain component of a reimbursable meal. Please consult the food buying guide for additional information on how to credit the crust of these items.
Another popular question that we received is, do sugary cereals count as a grain-based dessert?
Okay. Cereals served in the CACFP must meet a sugar limit of no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. If you serve a cereal that has more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce, then it cannot count toward a reimbursable meal or snack. For additional information on identifying the sugar limits in cereals, please see our worksheet. So the short answer to that question is no, sugary cereals do not count as a grain-based dessert. However, when serving cereals, we do want you to remember that they must meet the sugar limit of no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce.
Okay. Another one that we received, it says, can a grain-based dessert that is not reimbursable in the CACFP be offered to pre-K students as an extra, in addition to the reimbursable meal, or they cannot be offered to students at all?
Okay. So grain-based desserts that are not part of the reimbursable meal can be offered to children. As we stated in the presentation, we do recognize that a lot of times centers want to have special celebrations where they want to serve the children in their care or their adult participants grain-based desserts. These items can be served, but they cannot be credited as part of the reimbursable meal or snack. Okay, so that is all the time we have for questions today. So please feel free to visit our website, subscribe to our monthly e-newsletter, connect with us via email at theteamnutritionusda.gov, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you all for the great questions. If you have additional questions or need more clarification on any topics we discussed, please contact your state agency or sponsoring organization. That is all the time we have today, and we look forward to hearing from you again in January. Thank you.